When I saw my husband flipping through my phone, my heart skipped a beat, not because of the fear of being caught, but because I knew he'd see the messages. The ones I forgot to delete. I tried to snatch the phone out of his hands, but he pulled it back, skillfully, and continued reading. I watched his face change, reading line by line, and felt my life crumble in front of me in a matter of seconds. Yes, he would find out the truth, but not the whole truth. His hands trembled as he flipped through, and I knew he was just moments away from seeing the one message that would destroy my life. The one that would explain everything or, maybe, confuse him even more. My phone suddenly buzzed in his hands, and a new notification popped up. I saw his face go pale as he read the sender's name. My husband froze. He didn't even blink. I bit the inside of my cheek, a bad habit when I'm nervous. My nerves mixed with the horror of realizing what I had done. His breathing quickened. I could hear it even from 2 meters away. This was exactly what I had feared the most. Because 3 months ago, I made a mistake. The one mistake that changed everything, and now I didn't know what to do. But let me tell you how it all happened. Before I share the secret I've been trying to hide for so long, tell me in the comments where you're watching from and answer this question. Have you ever had a secret that you tried so hard to keep, but in the end, it all fell apart? I always thought I was in control. After all, it had been years of managing life, work, and motherhood with a semblance of balance. My husband and I had built a life that others might envy. We had a nice home, a comfortable routine, and 2 wonderful children who were growing up so fast. Yet, something was missing. It wasn't obvious at first. It wasn't some grand, glaring flaw. But as time passed, I felt it creeping in, slowly at first, then faster, until it consumed me. I loved my husband, but somewhere along the way, we had lost what once brought us together. It wasn't about the big moments, it was the small ones that seemed to disappear. The laughter after a long day, the quiet moments of shared connection, the simple gestures that spoke more than words. Over the years, we had settled into a rhythm that didn't require much effort from either of us. But rhythm can become a cage if you're not careful. We were trapped in a routine, in a marriage that had become more about logistics than love. It wasn't that we fought or didn't care, it was that we stopped reaching for each other. The passion faded, and with it, a part of me I hadn't realized was missing. I didn't mean for it to happen. I didn't wake up one day and decide that I was going to betray him. It was never part of my plan. But when you're starved for attention, for connection, for affection, sometimes, you end up in places you never imagined. It started with a text message from him, my personal trainer. At first, it was harmless, just a simple check-in about my workout schedule. I'd been going to the gym more often, trying to regain some sense of self after years of putting my family's needs ahead of my own. He was kind, attentive, always asking how I felt during the sessions. But over time, those check-ins became longer, more personal. We shared small talks about our lives, our thoughts on everything from books to movies, to our hopes and dreams. He was a good listener, something I hadn't realized I'd been craving. There was nothing overtly flirtatious at first. But there was a shift in my own behavior. I started looking forward to our conversations. I found myself dressing differently for the gym, nothing obvious, but enough to make me feel good. Enough to feel noticed. It wasn't intentional. I didn't expect anything to come of it. But in a way, I knew it already had. My body responded to his presence, to the way his attention felt, even though it was innocent at first. There was a part of me that wondered if I was simply bored, or if it was something deeper, something I wasn't ready to admit even to myself. Then came that first time we crossed the line. We were alone in the gym after hours, finishing up our session. It was late, and the place was empty, save for a few people cleaning up. I felt his eyes on me as I wiped the sweat off my brow. His usual professional demeanor had softened, and I felt a warmth spreading through me that wasn't from the workout. There was an electricity in the air, a tension I couldn't deny. He asked if I wanted to grab a drink after, just to unwind. I knew it was harmless. People did that all the time, didn't they? But I felt something inside me stir, something I hadn't felt in years. I had told myself I wasn't going to do this, that I had too much to lose. But when I saw him looking at me like that, I couldn't push the feeling away. I said yes. We went to a small bar nearby, the kind of place where the conversations were low and the lights dim. I don't even remember how we got there, but once we sat down, it felt like the world outside didn't exist. We talked about everything and nothing at the same time. And then, suddenly, his hand was on mine. My heart raced in my chest as I realized what was happening. His fingers were warm, steady, and they lingered for just a moment too long. I should have pulled away. I should have told him to stop. But I didn't. And before I knew it, I was leaning in. He kissed me gently, tentatively, as if testing the waters. And I kissed him back. It wasn't just the kiss, though. It was everything that came after, the way I felt alive, the way I felt seen in a way I hadn't in so long. For the first time in years, I wasn't just someone's wife or mother. I was a woman again. That night, I didn't think about my husband. I didn't think about anything except how I felt in that moment. And when I left the bar, I told myself it was a mistake, that I would never do it again. But I knew deep down that wasn't true. I had crossed a line, and now there was no going back. I thought about the kiss constantly over the next few days. Each time I saw him, that memory flashed in my mind. And each time I looked at my husband, I felt something shift inside me. A distance I couldn't close. I told myself I wasn't in love with him, that I still loved my husband, but the truth was, I wasn't sure anymore. All I knew was that I was drowning in a sea of guilt and desire, and I didn't know how to keep them from colliding. But I didn't tell anyone. Not yet. Not until everything would fall apart, which I knew, deep down, was inevitable. I woke up to the sound of my phone buzzing on the nightstand. For a moment, I just stared at it, watching the screen light up, knowing full well who was sending the message. It was late, later than usual for us to be communicating, but we had both gotten into the habit of late-night exchanges. As the message notification stayed on the screen, I felt the tension from yesterday's kiss resurface. It had been innocent, at least on the surface, but everything felt different now. That single moment had shifted something inside me. I didn't respond right away. Instead, I lay there, staring at the ceiling, my mind spinning. My husband, Mark, was fast asleep beside me. He didn't even stir when I got out of bed to check the message. It was a simple text, nothing too suggestive, but for me, it felt like an invitation to cross another line. "Are we still on for tomorrow?" the message read. I should have deleted it, I told myself. I should have ignored it completely. But I didn't. I was compelled to open it, to reply. I thought about how much easier it would be to just not respond, to avoid falling deeper into something I wasn't sure I could stop. But I knew, deep down, that I had already made the choice. I typed a quick reply, something casual, something that wouldn't betray the internal chaos swirling inside me. "Yeah, I'll be there. Same time." My fingers hovered over the screen for a moment longer, then I quickly pressed send before I could think any more about it. The message was out, and I couldn't take it back now. For a split second, I felt a wave of regret wash over me, but it passed just as quickly, replaced by an undeniable thrill. This was something I hadn't felt in years, and though I knew it was wrong, it was intoxicating. When I returned to bed, Mark shifted beside me, but he didn't wake. His arm instinctively reached across the bed, searching for me. I let him find me, but my thoughts were elsewhere. My body was there, but my mind was in a different place entirely. I tried to focus on the warmth of his hand, but it felt distant, like a memory of something I had long lost. In the morning, everything seemed normal. Mark made his coffee, and I did my usual morning routine, but there was a palpable difference in the air. We were both pretending, I suppose. Pretending like we hadn't lost touch. Pretending like I wasn't carrying a secret. My secret. Later that afternoon, I found myself getting ready to leave for my session at the gym. It was something I had grown accustomed to, but today felt different. As I stood in front of the mirror, applying a light touch of makeup, I caught a glimpse of myself. The woman staring back at me looked like someone I didn't recognize, a stranger, almost. She wasn't just a mother, a wife. She was someone else entirely, someone who was trying to reclaim something long gone. I dressed carefully, picking out a tight-fitting pair of leggings and a workout top that I felt good in. I told myself I was just going to work out, but even as I adjusted my outfit, I knew there was more to it. There was always more. When I arrived at the gym, I saw him before he saw me. He was talking to someone near the counter, but I couldn't tear my eyes away from him. It wasn't just his physique, it was everything about the way he carried himself. It was his ease, his confidence. The way he made everyone else fade into the background, as if they didn't matter. I felt a strange mixture of guilt and desire stirring inside me, but I pushed it aside. Today, I told myself, would be different. I wasn't going to let my emotions get the better of me. But deep down, I knew I was lying to myself. We started the session, and as usual, he guided me through the routine. But today, his hands lingered a little longer when adjusting my form, his touch seemed more deliberate, and I noticed the intensity of his gaze. Each time our eyes met, I felt that familiar pull, the one I couldn't ignore, no matter how much I wanted to. It was a dangerous game, and I was already losing. Feeling good, he asked, his voice low. I nodded, not trusting myself to speak. The space between us felt charged, like the air before a storm. I couldn't look at him without thinking of last night. The kiss. The way he had felt against me, so present and so real. How long had it been since I had felt like that? We continued the workout in silence, but it wasn't a comfortable silence. There was tension in the air, an unspoken understanding between us that was both thrilling and terrifying. And as the session came to an end, he looked at me in a way that made my heart race. I'll see you tomorrow, he said. There was a finality to his words, but also a promise. A promise I couldn't ignore. I smiled and nodded, but inside, I was already planning my next move. I didn't want this to end, but I knew it had to. At least, it should have. I was married. I had a family. This was a betrayal. I had crossed a line, and I couldn't undo it. But it felt too good to stop. As I walked out of the gym, I felt a strange mix of emotions, guilt, excitement, and an overwhelming sense of inevitability. This was happening, whether I wanted it to or not. And I didn't know how much longer I could pretend it wasn't. Later that evening, as I sat at the dinner table with Mark, everything felt off. The conversation was polite, but hollow. I could feel his presence beside me, but I felt as if I were a million miles away. My thoughts kept drifting back to the gym, to him. To what had happened, and to what was about to unfold. Mark asked me about my day, but I couldn't focus on anything except the words he wasn't saying. The questions that were left unasked. The silence between us had become deafening, and I wondered how much longer I could keep up the act. The phone buzzed again, a familiar ping that made my stomach flip. I glanced down at the screen, almost afraid to look. But I couldn't help it. It was him. Same time tomorrow? I stared at the message for a long moment, trying to ignore the beating of my heart in my chest. I could feel the weight of it, this secret, this temptation. I could feel it pulling me in, as if there were no way out. I knew I had to make a decision. I knew the consequences of my actions, but still, I couldn't bring myself to stop. Not yet. The next few days passed in a blur. My world, once so neatly organized, was now a chaotic mess of half-truths and silent conversations. I went through the motions, pretending everything was fine, but inside, I felt like I was slowly suffocating. Each time I looked at Mark, I saw the man I had promised to love forever. Yet, at the same time, I felt an emptiness, a distance I couldn't bridge, and it wasn't just because of what was happening with the trainer. It was because I had stopped trying to connect with him long before that. Mark and I didn't talk about the things that really mattered. We didn't talk about the distance that had grown between us over the years. We didn't talk about how the silence had become so comfortable that we didn't even notice when it turned into a chasm. We just went on with our routine, going through the motions of being a married couple. There was no spark anymore, no excitement, no passion. But the worst part of it was that I didn't know how to fix it. I didn't know if I could fix it. Every time I tried to open up, the words caught in my throat. It felt like too much time had passed, like it was too late to say what needed to be said. So, I didn't say anything. And it felt like the more I kept to myself, the more I withdrew from him, the deeper I got into the lie that was now my life. The trainer and I exchanged messages each day. It was casual at first, just logistics about our training sessions, but there was something more beneath the surface. He didn't just ask about my workout, he asked about how I was feeling, what I was doing. He paid attention to the small details, things Mark hadn't asked about in a long time. And every time I replied, I could feel the thrill of being seen again. It was intoxicating. I was a woman again. And it didn't matter that it was wrong. The fact that it felt so right made me question everything. What was so bad about feeling desired? What was so wrong with wanting to be noticed, to feel alive? As the days passed, the pull between us grew stronger. The trainer was always there, always present in my mind, even when I was with Mark. The guilt was there too, a constant companion, but it wasn't as loud as the other voice, the one that told me I deserved this. I deserved to feel wanted, to feel like I wasn't just fading away into a life that no longer seemed mine. One evening, I found myself sitting at the kitchen table, a glass of wine in my hand, trying to read through some work emails. But my mind kept drifting back to him. To the way he looked at me, the way his presence made me feel like I mattered. Mark was in the other room, doing his usual routine, watching the news, sipping on his own glass of wine, as if everything was perfectly normal. As if we hadn't both stopped trying a long time ago. I felt guilty for even thinking about the trainer while Mark was right there. But it wasn't the guilt that was overwhelming me anymore. It was the desire to escape from the life I had built, the life that no longer seemed like mine. My phone buzzed on the table. I glanced down at the screen and saw his name. The trainer. I stared at the message for a moment, trying to push down the rising excitement. I knew I shouldn't respond right away, but I couldn't help myself. Hey, are you free for coffee tomorrow? I wanted to talk about your progress. I could feel my pulse quicken. I knew what he was really asking. We hadn't talked outside of the gym or our training sessions. This was something different. It was an invitation to cross another line, and I knew it. And yet, I couldn't stop myself from typing the response. Sure. Coffee sounds great. Same place? I hit send before I could overthink it. It was out there now, and there was no going back. I knew what this would lead to. I knew that once I took this step, there would be no turning back. But in that moment, I didn't care. I wanted to feel alive again, and he made me feel that way. It wasn't just about the physical attraction, though that was part of it. It was the way he saw me, truly saw me, in a way that had been missing for so long. I set my phone down and sat back in my chair. For the first time in days, I took a deep breath and let it out slowly. I had made a choice. And I wasn't sure if it was the right one, but it was the one I had made. The next morning, I woke up early, as usual. Mark was still asleep, and I quietly slipped out of bed to get ready for the day. I didn't want to wake him. I didn't want to face the questions I knew would come if I did. Instead, I grabbed my phone and checked the message again. Great. See you at 10. I felt a knot form in my stomach. I wasn't nervous, not exactly. But there was something in the pit of my stomach, a flutter that didn't feel entirely like excitement. It was a mix of anticipation and dread, as if I knew I was stepping into a place I couldn't get out of. I dressed carefully, picking an outfit that I knew would make me feel confident, something casual but flattering. As I stood in front of the mirror, I couldn't help but notice how different I looked now. The woman in the reflection wasn't just the mother, the wife. She was someone else. She was the woman I had buried under years of responsibilities, under the weight of a marriage that had become more about duty than desire. I took a deep breath and left the house, the familiar morning routine slipping away with each step. I knew where I was going, and though my heart raced, there was also something strangely calming about it. This was my choice. This was the path I had chosen, and no matter how wrong it also felt like the only thing that made sense in the moment. When I arrived at the coffee shop, I saw him immediately. He was sitting at a corner table, a cup of coffee in front of him, his eyes scanning the room. He looked up as I walked in, and for a moment, I thought I saw something shift in his gaze, something more than just the usual friendly look. But I didn't say anything. Instead, I walked over and sat down across from him. "Hi," I said, my voice almost a whisper, as if speaking any louder would break the fragile tension between us. He smiled, his eyes softening. "Hey. I'm glad you could make it." We talked about the usual things, my progress with the workouts, how I was feeling physically, but underneath it all, there was a current of something else. Every word felt like it was weighted with meaning. I was acutely aware of every movement he made, every glance he gave me. And I could feel that same magnetic pull that had been there from the beginning, stronger than ever. And yet, the guilt remained. It lingered in the back of my mind, a reminder of everything I was risking. But in that moment, sitting across from him, I couldn't focus on that. All I could focus on was how good it felt to be wanted, to be seen. "I've been thinking about you a lot," he said, his voice lower now, almost intimate. My heart skipped a beat. I wasn't sure how to respond. I wanted to say something, but the words caught in my throat. Instead, I just nodded, unable to form the right response. "You've been hard to forget," he added, leaning in slightly. My breath caught in my throat. I could feel the walls closing in around me, and yet, I couldn't stop myself from leaning in, just a little bit, as if the space between us had suddenly become too much to bear. We were standing on the edge, both of us. I knew it. He knew it. And there was no turning back. The next few days felt like I was walking on a tightrope, each step uncertain, the ground beneath me shaky and unpredictable. I couldn't stop thinking about the coffee date with the trainer. It wasn't just the physical pull I felt when he was near me, it was something deeper, something I hadn't even realized I was missing. He made me feel seen in a way I hadn't felt in years. He didn't just notice my appearance, he noticed my thoughts, my moods, the way I carried myself. There was an intensity in his attention that felt exhilarating, yet suffocating. When I came home that evening, Mark was sitting at the kitchen table, the dim light from above casting shadows across his face. He didn't look up when I walked in. He never did. The silence between us had become a living thing, something we both avoided acknowledging but that hung in the air like a heavy cloud. He was reading something, papers spread out in front of him. His usual focus on work seemed to be the only thing that kept him occupied these days. I didn't know if I was angry or relieved that he didn't ask about my day. He didn't ask where I'd been, who I'd seen. The questions that should have been asked never came. Maybe, I thought, he didn't care anymore. Or maybe he just didn't know how to ask. Either way, it left me feeling empty. The longer I stayed silent, the harder it became to break it. I started to prepare dinner, the routine so familiar it almost felt like muscle memory. Mark didn't seem to notice. He rarely did these days. When I placed his plate in front of him, he nodded but didn't meet my eyes. "Thanks," he mumbled. There was a moment, just a split second, where I thought I might say something. I wanted to tell him what I was feeling, to tell him how much I missed him. But the words never came. They lodged in my throat, and I swallowed them down. It wasn't just the trainer, I realized. It wasn't even the kiss or the texts. It was everything that had been left unsaid between Mark and me for so long. I was starving for something I couldn't quite define, something that didn't come from just being a wife or a mother. I was losing myself in the roles I had played for so long, and I didn't know how to get out of them. Dinner passed in a haze of awkward silences. I told myself I was being dramatic, that maybe it was just a rough patch. Everyone went through these things, didn't they? But the truth was that I didn't feel like I knew who I was anymore. I wasn't just someone's wife or someone's mother. But if I wasn't that, who was I? That night, when we went to bed, Mark turned over to face me. His hand brushed against mine, but it wasn't the same. The touch felt like an obligation more than anything else, a routine gesture that meant nothing. He didn't kiss me. He just laid there, eyes closed, breathing deeply in the dark. And I lay there, awake, unable to sleep, knowing that this was how it had become. I could feel the weight of the secret pressing down on me. It wasn't just the kiss, not anymore. It was everything. The lies I was telling myself, the guilt I was carrying, the desire I couldn't deny. I wasn't just hiding it from Mark, I was hiding it from myself. I kept telling myself I wasn't like this, that I wasn't the kind of person who would betray her husband. But then why was I lying in bed, thinking about him, feeling drawn to him in ways I didn't want to admit? The next morning, I felt the tension in the air before I even opened my eyes. Mark was already up, his side of the bed cold. I didn't ask where he was going or what he was doing. I didn't need to. We both knew the answers already. The silence between us had become our way of communicating, our way of avoiding the truths we didn't want to face. I spent the day trying to distract myself. I went for a run, I cleaned the house, I tried to focus on the things that normally filled my time. But my mind kept drifting back to him, the trainer. To the way he made me feel. I knew what I was doing was wrong, that I was walking a dangerous line, but I couldn't seem to stop. I felt like I was on the edge of something, like one more step would send me over. But every time I looked at Mark, I felt like I was already falling. Later that afternoon, my phone buzzed with a message from him. I froze for a moment before I even looked at it. Training tomorrow at 10? I should have ignored it. I should have put the phone down, walked away. But I didn't. I replied quickly, without thinking. Of course. See you then. As soon as I hit send, a wave of regret washed over me. But it was too late. I had already made the choice. And there was no going back. That night, Mark asked if I wanted to talk. His voice was soft, almost tentative, like he was waiting for me to say something, anything. But I didn't. I didn't know how to explain what I was feeling, what I had been feeling for weeks. How could I tell him that I was slipping away, that I didn't know how to hold on anymore? I'm fine, I said, though I wasn't. I knew I wasn't. He nodded, but I could see the worry in his eyes. It wasn't the first time I had said I was fine when I wasn't. But this time, I wasn't just lying to him. I was lying to myself. The next morning, as I was getting ready to leave, Mark kissed me goodbye. It was brief, the kind of kiss that was more like a gesture than anything else. He didn't say anything about the way I looked, the way I felt, and I didn't expect him to. I drove to the gym with a mix of excitement and dread. I knew what was coming, but I wasn't ready for it. I didn't know if I ever would be. When I walked in, he was waiting for me, as usual. But today felt different. There was something in the way he looked at me, something that made my heart race. "Ready to train?" he asked, his voice low, almost inviting. I nodded, but I could feel my hands trembling. My whole body was on edge, anticipating what would come next. I didn't know if I could handle it anymore. I didn't know how much longer I could keep playing this game. We went through the session, but it felt like time had slowed down. Every touch, every glance, seemed to linger longer than usual. I could feel the intensity building between us, and I knew that it wouldn't be long before everything would come to a head. By the end of the session, I was breathless. Not just from the workout, but from everything else. The pull between us was undeniable now, and I could feel it in my bones. He stood in front of me, his eyes locked on mine, and for the first time, I wasn't sure if I wanted to walk away. "I think you're ready for more than just training," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. I swallowed hard, my mind racing. I didn't know how to respond. But I knew one thing for sure, I had crossed the line. And there was no going back. The following morning was heavy with the weight of my choices. I could feel the decision I had made the day before pressing down on me like a 1,000-pound weight. I had crossed a line, and there was no easy way back. The feeling of guilt crept in, but so did the rush of anticipation. For the first time in a long while, I was unsure of what would come next, but strangely, that uncertainty was both terrifying and exhilarating. I woke up early, trying to shake off the lingering thoughts that clouded my mind. Mark was still asleep beside me, his steady breathing filling the quiet of the morning. He looked so peaceful, so innocent in that moment, completely unaware of what was happening inside me. I glanced at him, and for the first time, I wondered if he ever felt the same sense of disconnect that I did. Did he even notice? Or had we both just given up, resigned to the roles we had fallen into? I quietly slipped out of bed and into the bathroom, my movements deliberate, as though I were trying to keep everything about this morning as normal as possible. I looked at my reflection in the mirror, but I didn't recognize the woman who stared back at me. Her eyes were tired, her posture slumped with the weight of everything I was hiding. I had always been the one who kept things together, who took care of the details of our life, who made sure everything looked perfect on the outside. But now, I was breaking apart on the inside, and I wasn't sure how to fix it. The text from the trainer lingered in my mind. It had been short, simple, but it carried a weight that was impossible to ignore. He had asked if I wanted to meet up again, nothing more than a casual suggestion, or so I told myself. But I knew the truth. The truth was that I couldn't stop. And the more I thought about it, the more I realized that I didn't even know if I wanted to stop. I got dressed, focusing on my outfit. Something simple but flattering. A part of me wanted to pick something that would make me feel confident, even if I was hiding the truth from everyone around me. It wasn't just about the way I looked, it was about how I felt in my own skin. I didn't feel like the woman who had spent years in a marriage that had lost its spark. I felt like someone else, someone who was ready to take control of her own life again. As I finished getting ready, Mark stirred in bed. I didn't look at him directly, not wanting to engage. But I could feel his eyes on me as I headed for the door. He muttered something, but I didn't catch it. I was already out of the room before I could respond. The drive to the gym felt longer than usual. I wasn't sure if it was the anticipation or the guilt that made the seconds stretch out, but everything felt heavy. My hands gripped the steering wheel a little too tightly, and my heart pounded in my chest. I wasn't just nervous about meeting him, I was scared of what I was becoming. I wasn't sure when the line between right and wrong had blurred so completely, but I couldn't deny it anymore. I had let myself get pulled into something I didn't know how to get out of. When I arrived at the gym, he was already there, waiting for me. I saw him standing by the door, his posture relaxed, his eyes scanning the room. He looked calm, collected, as if nothing in the world could faze him. But when his gaze landed on me, I felt it again, the pull, the magnetic force between us that I couldn't escape. It was the same feeling I had when I first met him, but now it was stronger. It wasn't just physical attraction, it was something more. Something deeper, darker, and yet so thrilling. "Ready to get started?" he asked, his voice low, almost hushed, as though the words themselves were meant to be shared only between the two of us. I nodded, though I wasn't entirely sure I was ready for anything. I felt as though I had already crossed a threshold, and now everything was moving too quickly for me to catch up. I was caught in a web of my own making, and I wasn't sure how to get out. The workout started off like any other, but the tension between us was undeniable. Every touch, every glance, felt charged. It wasn't just about the physical movements anymore, it was about something else. Something unspoken. As we moved through the exercises, I could feel his eyes on me, watching my every move, and for a moment, it felt like the world had shrunk down to just the two of us. "Focus on your form," he said, his voice firm but not unkind. I nodded, trying to block out the noise in my head, but it was impossible. I could feel the heat rising in my chest, could feel the way my body responded to his presence. My breath quickened, not just from the exertion but from the electric charge in the air between us. "You're doing great," he added, his hand briefly brushing against my shoulder as he adjusted my stance. His touch was light, almost accidental, but it sent a jolt of electricity through me. For a second, I froze, not knowing how to react. But I didn't pull away. I didn't want to. The rest of the session passed in a blur. I was aware of every movement, every shift in his body, every moment when his eyes lingered on me a little longer than necessary. It was all too much, and yet, I didn't want it to stop. The workout ended, but the feeling didn't. I stood there, breathing heavily, unsure of what to do next. "Same time tomorrow?" he asked, his words casual, but there was an underlying tension in his voice. I knew what he was asking, and I knew that I couldn't say no. "Not yet." I hesitated for a moment, just a second, before I responded. "Yeah. I'll be here." As I left the gym, I felt like I was walking in a daze. My mind was spinning, my heart still racing from everything that had happened. I didn't know what I was doing anymore. I didn't know how to stop. But I also didn't know if I even wanted to. That night, Mark and I went through the motions of dinner and small talk, but the distance between us felt more pronounced than ever. He didn't ask how my day had gone, and I didn't tell him. It was easier that way. He didn't question me, and I didn't question him. We were just two people living in the same house, pretending that everything was fine. As I lay in bed that night, I could feel the weight of my actions pressing down on me. I had crossed a line, and there was no going back. The trainer had become more than just a distraction. He had become a symbol of everything I had been missing. And as I closed my eyes, I realized that I was at a crossroads. The path ahead was uncertain, but I knew one thing for sure, there was no turning back now. Tomorrow would come, and with it, another chance to choose. To choose him, or to choose my family. To choose the life I had, or to continue down this path I had started. And I didn't know which choice would be the right one. But I knew I couldn't keep pretending forever. The truth, whatever it was waiting for me. The tension between Mark and me grew more unbearable with each passing day. It was like living in a house full of ghosts, silent, haunting, yet ever-present. We didn't argue, we didn't shout, but the silence between us was louder than any words could ever be. The love we once shared seemed distant, like a memory I couldn't quite reach. I kept telling myself that this was just a phase, a rough patch, but deep down I knew it wasn't. It had been coming for a long time, and now it had settled in like a permanent fixture in our lives. Mark didn't ask about my day anymore. He didn't question where I had been or who I had seen. And I didn't ask him either. We both knew something was off, but neither of us had the courage to acknowledge it. We had stopped trying to fix the broken parts of our relationship, and instead, we just pretended everything was fine. It was easier that way, wasn't it? To keep living in the lie, to pretend that nothing had changed, even when everything had. The trainer and I continued our secret meetings, and each one felt like a step further down a path I couldn't undo. I knew I was risking everything, but I couldn't stop. It wasn't just about physical attraction anymore. It wasn't even about the fleeting moments of excitement. It was about the connection I felt with him, the way he made me feel seen, alive, and important in a way that Mark hadn't in years. The guilt was always there, lurking just beneath the surface. Every time I saw Mark, every time I caught his tired eyes across the dinner table, it gnawed at me. I wanted to confess, to tell him everything, but I didn't know how. I didn't know how to look him in the eye and say that I had been unfaithful, not just physically, but emotionally, in a way that was far deeper than a simple kiss or stolen moment. It was a betrayal of everything we had built, and the weight of it was suffocating me. But I couldn't stop. I didn't want to stop. I was trapped in a web of my own making, and each thread I pulled only tightened the noose around me. It was a Saturday morning when things began to shift. Mark had been out running errands, and I had the house to myself. I had planned to spend the morning catching up on work, but instead, I found myself scrolling through the messages on my phone. There was something comforting about the way he communicated with me. It was simple, straightforward, and never laced with the hesitation or distance that I had come to expect from Mark. "Can't wait to see you today," the message read. I stared at the screen, my heart fluttering in my chest. It was just a few words, but it was enough to remind me of everything I was risking, everything I had already lost. I had to stop this. I had to tell him that I couldn't keep seeing him. That what we were doing wasn't right. But then I remembered how I felt when he touched me, how I felt when we were together. I remembered the first time he kissed me, and the way I had felt alive again. I wasn't ready to let that go. I wasn't ready to stop feeling like I mattered. I glanced at the clock. It was almost time for my session, and I knew I had to go. But something inside me held me back. I couldn't do this anymore. I couldn't keep lying to Mark, to myself, or to him. I grabbed my phone and started typing a message. I hesitated, my finger hovering over the screen as I tried to find the right words. But before I could send anything, my phone rang. It was him. I felt my stomach drop as I answered the call, not sure what to expect. "Hey," his voice was smooth, warm, and comforting. It made my heart race. "Hi," I replied, trying to sound casual, though my voice betrayed me. "I was thinking we could grab lunch after the session today. You know, just to talk. About everything." I knew what he meant by everything. He wasn't just talking about the workout. He was talking about us. About what had been happening. I felt a lump form in my throat, and for a moment, I didn't know how to respond. I wanted to say no. I wanted to say that I couldn't do this anymore. But I didn't. I couldn't. "Yeah, I'd like that," I said, before I could stop myself. "I'll see you there." I hung up, feeling the weight of my decision settle heavily on my shoulders. I was too deep into this now. I couldn't stop it even if I wanted to. And part of me didn't want to. The part of me that was desperate for something more, something real, something that wasn't just a series of daily routines. The session went by in a blur. I barely remembered the exercises we went through, my mind too focused on what was coming next. When it was over, we both left the gym and walked to the nearby cafe. The air between us was thick with unspoken words. We didn't need to say anything, we both knew what this was. We sat down at a small table by the window, and for the first time, there was a real sense of tension between us. It wasn't just about the physical attraction anymore. It wasn't just about the moments we shared. It was about the consequences of our actions, about the lies we had both told. He looked at me, his eyes intense, as though he was searching for something I wasn't sure I was ready to give. I know this isn't easy, he said, his voice softer now. But I think we both know that we can't keep pretending. I can't keep pretending that this is just a workout, just a job. I need to know what this is. What we are. I looked at him, my heart pounding. This was it. This was the moment that everything would change. I could feel it in my chest, in my breath. I could feel the walls closing in around me. I know, I whispered, my voice barely audible. But I don't know what to do. I don't know what this is either. He reached out, his hand gently brushing mine. And for a moment, I allowed myself to feel it, the warmth of his touch, the connection between us. But then, just as quickly, the reality of it all hit me. I can't keep doing this, I said, pulling my hand away. I can't keep lying. I can't keep living like this. His eyes darkened, and I saw a flicker of disappointment, but also understanding. He didn't say anything. He didn't need to. We sat in silence for a few moments, either of us sure what to say next. I knew that this was the end of something, but I wasn't sure what it meant for either of us. Would we stop seeing each other? Or would we continue down this path, knowing the consequences? But in that moment, I knew one thing for sure, I had to stop running. I had to stop pretending. And whatever came next, I would face it head on. Because this had gone far enough. I didn't know what I expected when I left the cafe. Maybe a sense of relief, maybe closure. Maybe I thought that once I admitted it to myself, once I acknowledged that this had gone far enough, it would somehow feel different. But it didn't. It felt just as heavy, just as unresolved. The guilt still weighed heavily on me, like a rock in my chest. I had made the decision, I had said the words, and yet, nothing had changed. The drive home was the longest one I'd had in a long time. I tried to focus on the road, on the mundane details of the drive, but my mind kept wandering back to the conversation we had at the cafe. He had understood, but had he really? Did he know the weight of what I was doing, or was he just as lost in it as I was? I didn't have the answers, and I wasn't sure I wanted to find them. When I arrived home, Mark's car was parked in the driveway. For a moment, I hesitated at the door. I could feel the tension in my body, the sense of unease that had followed me all day. But there was no avoiding it. I had to face him. I had to face the truth. I opened the door and stepped inside. Mark was in the living room, sitting on the couch, scrolling through his phone. He looked up when he heard me, his eyes softening when he saw me standing in the doorway. "Hey," he said, his voice casual, but there was an edge to it, something beneath the surface that I couldn't quite place. "How was your day?" I stood there for a moment, unsure of what to say. How could I tell him? How could I explain everything that had happened, everything I had been feeling? The words seemed stuck in my throat. I didn't know where to begin. "It was fine," I said, finally. It was a lie, but it was the only thing I could say in that moment. He nodded and looked back at his phone, but something in the way he did it made me feel like he was waiting for more. As if he could sense that something was off, that I was hiding something from him. "Are you okay?" he asked, his voice softer this time, more vulnerable. The question hit me like a punch in the gut. I wanted to say yes. I wanted to tell him that everything was fine, that nothing had changed. But the truth was, I wasn't okay. And the worst part was that I wasn't sure if I wanted to be. "I'm fine," I repeated, the words feeling hollow as they left my mouth. He didn't say anything for a while. We just stood there, the silence stretching between us. I could hear the sound of my heartbeat in my ears, loud and fast. I knew he was waiting for me to say something more, but I didn't know what. I didn't know how to explain the whirlwind of emotions I had been feeling, the confusion, the guilt, the desire. I didn't know how to explain that I had crossed a line, and I wasn't sure how to come back from it. "I think we need to talk," he said finally, breaking the silence. I felt my stomach drop. The last thing I wanted to do was have this conversation. The last thing I wanted was to admit the truth. But I knew it was coming. I knew that sooner or later, we would have to talk about what was happening between us. I nodded, my mouth dry. "Yeah, I think we do." We sat down on the couch, and for a moment, neither of us spoke. I could feel the weight of the conversation hanging in the air, thick and uncomfortable. Mark didn't look at me right away. He was staring at his hands, his fingers tapping nervously on his knee. I couldn't remember the last time we had talked like this, really talked. It felt like a lifetime ago. "I've been thinking," he said slowly, his voice low, "about us. About what's been happening lately." I felt my heart race. This was it. The moment I had been dreading. I couldn't look at him. I couldn't face him knowing the truth that I was hiding. "I know something's wrong," he continued. "I don't know what it is, but I can feel it. You've been distant. You've been different." I closed my eyes, my chest tightening. How could I explain it? How could I tell him that I had been pretending, that I had been lying to him, to myself? How could I tell him that I had been thinking about someone else, someone who made me feel like I was seen again, like I mattered? "I'm sorry," I said, the words slipping out before I could stop them. "I know I've been distant. I didn't mean to shut you out." He turned to face me, his expression softening. "I know you didn't. But you have. And it's killing me. I don't know how to fix it, Liza. I don't know what's going on with you, with us." I could feel the tears welling up in my eyes, but I fought them back. I didn't want to cry. I didn't want to break down in front of him. Not like this. Not when I had already betrayed him in ways that I couldn't undo. "I don't know either," I whispered, my voice barely audible. "I don't know what's happening. I don't know how to fix this." Mark reached out, placing his hand over mine. I flinched at the touch, and for a moment, I felt a wave of guilt wash over me. I had pushed him away for so long, and now, here he was, trying to reach out, trying to fix something I had broken. "I don't want to lose you," he said quietly, his voice full of raw emotion. "But I can't keep pretending that everything's fine when it's not." I looked at him, and for the first time in what felt like years, I saw the man I had married, the man I had once loved so deeply. But even as I looked at him, I couldn't shake the feeling that it was too late. That everything had already changed. "I'm sorry," I repeated, my voice breaking. "I never meant for any of this to happen." Mark's eyes were filled with a mixture of sadness and frustration. He didn't say anything, just nodded slowly, like he was processing everything. "We need to figure out what we want," he said after a moment. "We need to figure out if this is worth saving. I need to know if you're still here, or if you've already left." I felt a sharp pain in my chest, like someone had taken a knife and twisted it. I wasn't sure what the answer was. I wasn't sure if I was still here. Or if I had already left, piece by piece, without even realizing it. I don't know, I whispered, my voice shaky. I don't know anymore. The silence stretched between us, thick and suffocating. I didn't know what to do. I didn't know how to fix it. I had made so many mistakes, and now, I wasn't sure if I could undo them. But one thing was clear, this was the point of no return. And no matter what happened next, everything was going to change. I woke up the next morning feeling like I had been hit by a freight train. The conversation with Mark had left me emotionally drained, and yet, the tension still lingered in the air. The truth was that nothing had changed. The uncertainty that had plagued our relationship for months still hung over us. But I knew deep down that something had shifted. That conversation had opened up something inside of me, something I couldn't ignore anymore. I spent the entire morning pacing around the house, trying to sort through my thoughts. What was I doing? How had I let it get this far? I was scared, unsure, and yet, there was a part of me that was relieved. For the first time in ages, I had said something that was true. I had admitted to Mark that I was struggling, that I didn't know how to fix things. It felt like a small step, but it was a step, nonetheless. As the hours passed, I couldn't shake the image of the trainer from my mind. His eyes, his touch, the way he made me feel alive again, it haunted me. Every time I tried to focus on something else, his face appeared in my mind, reminding me of what I was risking. I had told Mark the truth about my feelings, but I hadn't told him everything. I hadn't told him about the secret that had been festering inside me for weeks. I hadn't told him about the trainer, about the moments we had shared, about the betrayal that had been eating away at me from the inside. I wasn't ready. I wasn't sure if I would ever be ready. But that didn't mean I didn't feel the weight of it, pressing down on me, making every step feel heavier than the last. The truth was that I had become someone I didn't recognize. I had crossed a line, and there was no going back. But the question remained, what did I want now? Was I willing to risk everything, to lose Mark, to destroy the life we had built, just for the sake of feeling alive again? I knew I couldn't keep living in this limbo. I couldn't keep lying to Mark, to myself. I had to make a decision, and I had to make it soon. But even as I thought about it, I felt the pull of the trainer's presence in my mind. I had never felt so torn in my life. The doorbell rang, snapping me out of my thoughts. I wasn't expecting anyone. I hesitated for a moment, then slowly walked to the door. When I opened it, I was surprised to find Mark standing there, holding a bouquet of flowers. His expression was uncertain, as if he didn't quite know how to act. I thought I'd try something different, he said quietly, holding the flowers out to me. I know we've been distant lately. I wanted to do something to show you that I'm still here. That I still care. I looked at him, feeling a lump form in my throat. This was it, the moment where I had to decide what to do. I had spent so long hiding my feelings, pretending everything was fine, but now the truth was staring me in the face. Mark had made an effort. He was trying. But was it too little, too late? I took the flowers from him, feeling the weight of his gesture. I wasn't sure what to say. I wasn't sure if anything could fix this. But I wasn't ready to let go either. Not yet. Thank you, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. I could see the hesitation in his eyes, the way he was waiting for me to say more, but I didn't know how. The words felt stuck in my throat. He stepped inside, closing the door behind him, and we stood there for a moment, not knowing where to go from here. The silence was thick, uncomfortable, but it was also honest. We were both trying, in our own way, but it felt like we were speaking different languages. I've been thinking a lot, Mark said, breaking the silence. I know things haven't been easy. I know we've drifted apart. But I'm willing to try, Liza. I want to fix this. I want to fix us. I felt a rush of emotions flood over me, guilt, sadness, relief. He was trying, but I wasn't sure if I could meet him halfway. I wasn't sure if I could find my way back to the woman I once was, the woman who loved him without hesitation. I want to try too, I said quietly, my eyes not meeting his. But I don't know how. I don't know if it's possible. Mark reached out and took my hand gently, his fingers warm against my skin. We can figure it out, he said. One step at a time. But even as he said those words, I knew that we couldn't go back to the way things were. We could try, but the truth was, something had already changed. And I didn't know if I could ever truly go back. I spent the rest of the day in a daze. Mark was there, trying to make things right, and I appreciated it. I did. But a part of me couldn't stop thinking about the trainer. About what he had given me that I hadn't even realized I was missing. I couldn't help but wonder if the choice I had made was the right one. If I had done the right thing by coming home, by trying to salvage something with Mark. That night, when Mark went to bed, I stayed awake, staring at the ceiling, listening to the sound of his breathing beside me. I felt trapped in a life that wasn't mine anymore, a life that felt too small for who I had become. I had to make a choice. I had to decide what kind of person I wanted to be. The woman who tried to fix her marriage, or the one who had already walked away, piece by piece. I didn't know what the future held, but I knew that I couldn't keep pretending. Not anymore. I had to face the truth, no matter how painful it was. The truth about myself, about my marriage, and about the choices I had made. I closed my eyes, but sleep didn't come. It was just another night in a long string of nights where I felt alone, even when I wasn't. And as I lay there, I realized that the hardest part wasn't facing Mark, or facing the trainer. The hardest part was facing myself. And I wasn't sure I was ready to do that. But I would have to. Because the truth was, there was no other way forward. The days that followed felt like they were dragging on, heavy with unspoken words and unresolved emotions. I found myself moving through life like a ghost, passing through the motions but never truly present. Mark and I had agreed to work through our issues, but the truth was, I didn't know where to start. I didn't know how to fix what was broken between us, and I certainly didn't know how to undo what I had done. I kept asking myself the same question over and over again, what do I want? Do I want to stay in this marriage, try to rebuild the life I once had with Mark, or do I want something else? Something I wasn't sure I could ever have. Every time I looked at Mark, I saw the man I had once loved so deeply. But now, it was harder to remember why. The distance between us had grown so wide, and I couldn't tell if it was something we could ever cross. He was trying, I could see that. He was being patient, understanding, giving me space. But I wasn't sure I was capable of giving him the same. I had promised him that I would try, that we would work on our relationship. But each time I tried to reach out to him, each time I tried to connect, the weight of my secret held me back. I couldn't be honest with him, not fully. How could I? How could I tell him about the moments I had shared with someone else, someone who had made me feel more alive than I had in years? That morning, I found myself standing in front of the mirror, staring at my reflection. I didn't recognize the woman looking back at me. She was tired, worn down, her eyes hollow and distant. I had become someone I didn't know, someone I didn't like. I had lost myself somewhere along the way, and now I wasn't sure how to find my way back. I thought about the trainer. I couldn't help it. He had become a part of my life, a part of me that I didn't know how to remove. But it wasn't just about him. It was about what he represented. He represented the part of me that had been hidden away for so long, the part that had been craving something more, something real. And now that I had tasted it, I didn't know if I could ever go back to the life I had before. I heard Mark's footsteps in the hallway, and for a moment, I wondered if he knew. If he could sense that something was off, that I was slipping away. But when he entered the room, his face was as calm as ever, like he was trying to pretend that everything was fine. "Morning," he said softly, his voice tentative. "How did you sleep?" I looked at him, my heart heavy with the weight of everything I hadn't said. "I didn't sleep much," I replied. It wasn't a lie. I hadn't slept at all. He frowned, a subtle shift in his expression that told me he wasn't buying it. "You look tired. We should talk, Liza." "Really talk?" I nodded slowly, feeling a knot tighten in my stomach. I knew what was coming. I had known this conversation was inevitable. But the thought of saying the words out loud, the words that would change everything, terrified me. "I know," I said quietly, forcing myself to meet his gaze. "We do need to talk." We sat down on the couch together, the space between us feeling wider than it ever had before. I could feel the weight of his gaze on me, the way he was watching me, waiting for me to say something. But I didn't know what to say. The truth, the real truth, was too much to bear. "Liza," he began, his voice shaking slightly, "I've been thinking about what you said the other night. About how you're feeling, about how we've drifted apart. And I get it. I know I've been distant too. But I need to know if you're still here. I need to know if you still want to be with me." The question hit me like a punch to the gut. Could I answer him honestly? Could I tell him that I didn't know anymore? Could I admit to him that I had already crossed a line I couldn't uncross? "I don't know," I whispered, my voice barely audible. "I don't know what I want anymore, Mark. I don't know if I can fix this." His face fell, and for a moment, I saw the pain in his eyes. The pain I had caused him. "So, what does that mean?" he asked, his voice tight. "Does that mean you're done? Is this over?" I closed my eyes, trying to push back the tears that were threatening to spill. I didn't want this. I didn't want to hurt him. But I also didn't know how to fix it. I didn't know if I even wanted to fix it. "I don't know," I repeated, feeling lost. "I don't know if I can go back to how things were. I don't know if I can go back to us." He didn't say anything for a long time. He just sat there, his shoulders slumped, his face a mask of confusion and hurt. I could feel his pain, and it tore me apart. But at the same time, there was a part of me that felt numb. I didn't know what I was supposed to feel anymore. Finally, he spoke, his voice low. "Then what are we doing, Liza? What are we holding on to if we're both just lost?" I wanted to say something, to tell him that I was still here, that I still cared. But the words wouldn't come. Everything I said felt like a lie. Everything I wanted to say felt like a betrayal. "I'm sorry," I whispered, my voice breaking. "I'm so sorry." Mark stood up suddenly, as if he couldn't sit still anymore. He ran a hand through his hair, pacing in front of me. "I don't know if I can do this, Liza. I don't know if I can keep pretending like everything is fine when it's not." I stood up too, feeling a surge of desperation. "I don't want to lose you," I said, though it felt hollow. "I don't want to lose this." "But you're already gone," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "You've already left." And in that moment, I realized he was right. I had left. I had checked out long before this conversation ever happened. I had already made my decision, and I couldn't go back. "I'm sorry," I repeated, my heart breaking. "I don't know how to fix this. I don't know if I can." We stood there for a moment, the silence between us more deafening than any words could have been. I didn't know what the future held. I didn't know if we could come back from this. I didn't know if I could fix the mess I had made. But in that moment, I realized that I had already made the choice. And no matter how much I wanted to change my mind, there was no going back now. The morning after our conversation felt surreal, like I had woken up in a different life, one where the walls between Mark and me had finally collapsed. Everything about that day felt different, heavy with the weight of the truth we had finally acknowledged. I sat at the kitchen table, trying to concentrate on the pile of work in front of me, but my mind kept drifting back to Mark. I could still hear the quiet desperation in his voice, the way he had asked me if I was still here. I could feel the truth of his words, how far apart we had grown. Mark had left early, saying he had errands to run. It was a rare moment when I was alone, and yet, I didn't know what to do with the silence that filled the house. It was like everything was suspended in time, like we were both waiting for something to happen, waiting for the other to make the next move. I couldn't stop thinking about the trainer. His face, his words, the way he had made me feel, it haunted me, even now. I had told Mark that I was sorry, but I hadn't told him the whole truth. The truth about the trainer, the emotional weight of what had happened between us. I didn't know how to tell him. I didn't know how to explain the pain I had been carrying for so long, the confusion, the need for something more than what my marriage had become. It wasn't just the trainer, though. It was everything. The disconnection I felt with Mark, the yearning for something that wasn't there anymore. I had tried to ignore it for so long, to pretend that everything was fine, but the cracks had started to show. And now that they had, I didn't know how to fix them. I didn't know if I wanted to. I stood up and walked to the window, staring out at the quiet street. The morning sun was just beginning to break through the clouds, casting a soft golden light over everything. It should have been comforting, but all I felt was emptiness. I had spent so much time trying to hold everything together, trying to keep up the facade that everything was fine. But now, with the truth out in the open, I wasn't sure where to go from here. The doorbell rang, pulling me out of my thoughts. I glanced at the clock. Mark wasn't due back for another hour. I wasn't expecting anyone. My heart skipped a beat when I saw who it was standing on the other side of the door. It was the trainer. I felt a rush of conflicting emotions, surprise, guilt, a flutter of excitement. What was he doing here? I hadn't expected to see him outside of the gym, and certainly not now, when everything in my life was so uncertain. "Liza," he said softly, his voice warm. "I know this might seem out of nowhere, but I needed to talk to you." I stood frozen for a moment, unsure of what to say. My heart was pounding, and I could feel the weight of the situation pressing down on me. I knew this was a moment that would change everything. I stepped aside, letting him in, but I couldn't shake the feeling that I was making a mistake. That by allowing him into my life, into this fragile moment, I was only making things worse. But I couldn't stop myself. Something about his presence made me feel alive in a way that nothing else had for so long. "Is everything okay?" I asked, my voice shaky. I didn't know why he was here, and I wasn't sure I was ready for what he might say. He nodded, his eyes softening as he looked at me. "I just wanted to check on you. After everything that's been happening, I know it's complicated. But I need you to know that I'm here for you, no matter what." I looked at him, my emotions swirling inside me. I wanted to believe him. I wanted to believe that everything could be simple, that there was an easy way out of all this confusion. But there wasn't. I couldn't escape the reality of what I had done. And yet, I couldn't deny that I wanted to be with him, that I wanted something more than what I had with Mark. "I don't know what to do," I said quietly, my voice barely above a whisper. "Everything feels so broken." He stepped closer, and I could feel the intensity of his presence. He wasn't touching me, but it felt like he was. "I get it. I know it's hard. But you don't have to do this alone. You don't have to figure everything out right now." I looked at him, my heart racing in my chest. He was offering me something, something I wasn't sure I deserved, something I wasn't sure I could accept. I could feel the pull of it, the desire to escape into his world, to leave behind the mess I had made. But I knew better than that. I couldn't just walk away from everything. I'm not sure I can keep doing this, I said, my voice trembling. I don't know what's right anymore. I don't know what I want. He nodded, understanding in his eyes. It's okay to not know. You don't have to have all the answers right now. But I want you to know that whatever you choose, I'm here. I'll be here. I wanted to believe him. I wanted to believe that there was a way out of this, that there was a path where I could find happiness without tearing my life apart. But I wasn't sure. I wasn't sure if I could walk away from the life I had built, from the man I had promised to love. I wasn't sure if I could leave Mark, even though I knew we had already drifted too far apart. The silence between us grew thick, filled with unspoken words. He was standing so close to me, but I felt a world of distance between us. It wasn't just physical space, it was emotional, a chasm that I didn't know how to cross. I need to think, I said finally, my voice shaky but resolute. I need some time to figure out what I'm doing. What I want. He nodded again, stepping back. He didn't push. He didn't try to convince me to make a decision. He just looked at me, like he was waiting for me to find the answers on my own. I'll give you the time you need, he said quietly. But just know that I'm here. As he turned to leave, I felt a pang of loss. Not because I wanted him to stay, but because I knew I was running out of time. Time to make a decision, time to figure out who I was and what I wanted. I couldn't keep pretending. I couldn't keep living in this limbo between two worlds, between Mark and the trainer, between the life I had and the one I wasn't sure I could have. I stood at the door for a moment after he left, staring at the empty space where he had been. I didn't know what I was supposed to do now. I didn't know what the right choice was. But I knew one thing for sure, I couldn't stay in this place forever. Something had to change. And whatever that change was, it would come soon. Very soon.